research as much as I can what is next generation for us becomes kind of not old hat but standard in my story for the people that I write about. I do get caught up in technobabble because I write science fiction.
Right on.
So that's one thing that I do. I also read other things like in Psychology Today about the mind, and then I put things together. You know, sometimes I just imagine what would make my life easier. You know, it would be nice to have a fully automated home. You know, so you have a computer you call companion. You know, or something like that.
And the important thing too is that whether it's science fiction, or whether you're pushing new technology or working with old technology or whatever it is, research is key. Now, there's two things you need to remember about science fiction that someone told me a while ago. Is that you have hard science fiction and then you have like soft science fiction and space opera. And that's a little bit different, right? So you can kind of get away from stuff. So what's an example? Well, 2001 is kind of hard science, and Star Wars is kind of fluffy science, right? The problem is with hard science is that unless you have a scientist on speed dial, you need to be careful.
Yeah.
Because the fans of hard science fiction will drag you across the coals several times.
For sure. That's what my glossary came to be about.
Yeah. So you
So I
gotta
have to explain things that I created.
All right.
Yeah,
There's a book, a wonderful book called Biomimicry, and it's what got me started about in my world. I think whenever you create a world and you're creating science, you have to create a philosophy about what that science is. In my world, the science is based on biology. So they believe instead of conquering the world, they are stewards of that world, and they must be in harmony with that world. So all of their technology is in harmony with biology. And in this book called Biomimicry, it talks about how we can have everything we want today if we just look at nature, right? So for energy, so if we just look at a leaf, it's a proton, it's a photon harvester, right? So it's proton, not photon, proton harvester. So why can't we make all of our roofs that same way, and then we clean? It creates oxygen, hydrogen, and water. So we would create our own water, we create hydrogen for fuel and oxygen to breathe. So we could have this green environment for energy and have all the energy we want. It talks about how to make a computer if you just map the brain. The only danger is if the brain dreams, would your then computer dream? And therefore what is dreaming? And
then come the questions, and then come the stories, right?
Right. So
Why does the computer kill you?
Well, that's kind of what I did. Is you have to make a decision when you're building a world. It is your world. So are you making like a Tolkien? You know, are you making it steampunk? Are you making it whatever? And then from that, I think your research then will guide you to the technology that fits that world.
Right.
Does that make sense?
So research.
You know, and I read. I'm an avid reader. I mean, you talk about when we were kids. I mean, I literally read encyclopedias.
Yeah.
And some stuff is just
definitely done that.
The glasses,
Yeah.
they're not just for show. I'm an avid. I think to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader.
Yeah, I was just going to say, reader equals writer.
Yeah.
And people go, who's your one favorite author? I don't have one favorite author. I have many favorite authors because I like to have a 360-degree view of my worlds, using other people, not using it, but being inspired by other people and how they create their worlds. And then that keeps me in center with my world. So I read a lot of people.
You have to do your research. You have to read as much as you can. That's important. Let's get to another question. Yes, Nat.
How much description would be too much description? Don't spend 2 or 3 pages describing.
Well, I don't know.
So again, it's in the context of your storytelling. It's how important it is to the story. Some authors are more wordier than others, and that's not a mortal sin. But what you have to be careful of is that if you lose the reader along the way. So Stephen King is the master of saying a whole lot of stuff in over-describing and saying nothing, right?
Yeah.
But there are people that love that type of exposition. It's not for everybody.
Even Asimov does that.
Yeah, Asimov does it too.
Goes on and on and on.
So
it's like it's just a water bottle.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. It's just a water bottle.
My
Phillip KJ does it as well.
My philosophy when I write is, what does the reader need to know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I try to stick with that.
If you're more fantasy, you don't have to describe as much, but like I write science fiction, so I'm creating something that you've never seen before. And I tried, one thing I learned when I was in school, try not to always make it too earthy if it's not. So if I'm trying to create something that's like, it was just like the
Don't do
Don't say it's like a salt shaker, because it's not.
It's not. But
You know, and so, so that's how I get wordy, but I break it up with dialogue sometimes.
Which
Where in the scene I'm putting it. So if there was one scene where I have one of the characters, he's walking from his office to a meeting, and as he's walking to his office, he walks by a bank of viewports, and he sees the ship that he's going to command docked outside. Well, I describe that ship, but I'm also describing the noises around him, also the busyness that's around him, and then the yogi's like, sir, we've got to go. So I break it up with that, because if you get into these blocks of description,
you'll lose the
then you're writing a technical manual.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to the old saying, show, don't tell, right? So, you had a question, yes.
How much culture is too much culture to insert into the world?
So the secret in culture is one rule. Do not make fun of the culture that you're insulting, you're inserting, right?
Yeah, stereotype.
Stereotype, do not stereotype.
Or
So-
it becomes about the culture now, not about the people of the
Right.
culture.
Well,
So-
is the culture integral to your story? That's the real question.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if it is, then yeah, but if it's not, no.
Right.
Like if you have a story about something else, and then you start flooding the story with culture for no reason.
So example, the Pandora, the story of Pandora, Avatar. That was heavily about the two cultures colliding, so that was very important for the story. Yes, it was Pocahontas in space, and that's fine. But again, we said it in the other panel, every story's been told before. So you're just telling your version of the story with characters that you create, and your characters are important. And to your point, a world is important and a culture is important, and they're also characters. And so we mentioned Tolkien, right? So the hobbits have a very specific culture that's defined to them. The elves have a very specific culture that's defined to them. The horse lords have a very specific culture that's defined to them. But Tolkien doesn't beat you over the head with the culture, right? He essentially, it reveals itself as the story moves
As
along.
the journey moves along, it's like Dorothy on the Yellow Brick Road.
Road, yeah. As she moves through Oz, you see the other
Scarecrow, and
parts.
then there's the forest with the Tin Man, and then there's the woods with the Cowardly Lion, and then there's poppies. Poppies will make them sleep. And then there's the Emerald City. So you see the different aspects of a culture.
As you move through the world, right?
Does that make
So,
sense?
yes, go ahead.
When you're making a believable world, what do you think comes first, the culture or the history? Does your history influence your culture, or do you make up an idea of like what would your society be like, and then bring your history from that?
So I think, again, these are great questions, beautiful questions.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the best answer to that question is you do what works for your story best. So there's no right or wrong way to make a cake, right? You can make a cake different ways. You can have a chocolate cake, vanilla cake, pumpkin cake, and all of these things. I just made everybody hungry. So essentially, at the end of the day, creating a book is like creating a recipe or something like that. There's going to be elements that you're going to change. So in other words, the reason why that's a good saying is because everybody knows how to make scrambled eggs, hopefully, right? So, but there's people that do things differently. Some add milk, some add a little butter, some add salt and pepper, some put Tabasco sauce. Does it mean that you did the eggs the wrong way? No, what it means is you put your interpretation on it. So that's the same way a story is. So when you're talking about cultures, you're talking about histories. When you're creating your story, it's not, did the egg come before the chicken or the chicken before the egg? What it is what does it get